And defensively, listen, I don't know even how to rank the Green Bay. I would say defensively up front, the Green Bay Packers right now, especially with Sean Gary out, and we don't know how he's going to look this first year back. They're bottom half of the league on the defensive side. And I say that because I really like Preston Smith, and I think he's a great run defender. You know, he's not limited in the pass rush, but his numbers aren't necessarily always consistent in the pass rush game. And it's important. Like, you got pressure equals picks in this business. And I don't know if we get quite enough consistently. You just love to see a couple more. Kenny Clark had a down year. Is that a start of a trend, or is he going to bounce back? And a big question that needs answering that will directly affect him is, who's going to step up on the other side at the other defensive tackle position when they're in that nickel defense? If Devontae Wyatt turns out to be a juggernaut, like what some of these other Georgia guys in year 2, then we could be top 10. And then Lucas Van Ness, you draft this guy 13th pick. Where's he going to play? What does that look like? Like, some of these, you know, is he day one, like, serious minutes, can play this game at a high level? Because you just don't have that many guys. You're sitting here going, you know, if I look at the probably the best team in the league is the Eagles, right? They've got like 3 dudes from Georgia. I don't even know if they brought back. I think they brought back Fletcher. I think they might be bringing back Brandon Graham. I know they lost Hargraves, but they're like 10 deep. They're 10 deep, and they're really good. And they just drafted the 2 kids from Georgia. You know, Jalen Carter being arguably the best player in the draft, he had some off the field issues. And then but was it Nolan Smith? I mean, you're swimming in it. You can't beat that. Washington Commanders, they re-signed those 2 D tackles. Chase Young's going to be back. I mean, they're stacked. The Niners defense, good God. Up front, they're stacked. Cleveland Browns. Pittsburgh Steelers. Cam Hayward's still playing at a ridiculous level in his 30s. TJ Watt's coming back. Like, you've got dudes everywhere in this league, man. I think they're better, or if they can be as good as or better than the Cowboys. The Giants, really. I mean, I like the D tackle for the Giants, but you really look at the Giants and Thibodeau, those guys aren't going to – it's going to take – listen, if you're more worried about off-field stuff than on-the-field stuff, it's going to take a while. The Bills, they can be better than the Bills. The Tennessee Titans get stuff done, and they're not a great division. But Jeffrey Simmons is elite. He's elite. He affects the way that everybody plays. He improves the play around him as well as anybody in the National Football League. Kenny Clark could be Jeffrey Simmons. If you put him in that position, I think he could be the same kind of guy. Like, they're both fast off the ball, strong, explosive, limited pass rush moves, but good pass rushers because of the activity. The difference being Jeffrey's constantly put in a position, whether it's through games, whether it's through blitzes or dogs, where he gets single blocked and people just forget about him, or he's running like the second guy off a game. Secondary's making the quarterback hold the ball for an extra half second. He gets a sack. Like, he's not an elite pass rusher, but he's an elite pass rusher. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not afraid of him beating me, but then you turn around and he has a sack and a half during the game. You're like, well, how the hell did that happen? Yeah, I thought he was just a good run game player. So they could be they could be a top 10, 12 team, I think, on both sides of the ball. But some of these guys really got to step up. And I think particularly on defense, you got to be honest with yourself. You've got some talent, but how are you going to put the pieces in place? Because it looks like you really don't have a second D tackle unless Devontae Wyatt steps up. And then you got, maybe an excess of wealth at having 3 starting caliber DNs, with Lucas Van Ness being the 3rd guy and Barr being the 4th. How are you going to make that? How are you going to create, seamless TT, TE, ET games? Like, how are you going to start creating some free rush opportunities for these guys that I don't necessarily see all the time with this defense? That bend but don't break, cover 2 shell, blah, blah, blah defense. It doesn't spotlight these guys in the way you want. Like if Rashawn Gary comes back and he's got to go single up the right tackle all day, great. But if he's got to get a chip out every day versus the running back or the tight ends chipping out because they don't have to block anybody else because we're not bringing anybody else, you start going, well, you can't be the team that you want to be because you're not putting them in a position to be successful. And if you're not doing that, it's not on them. Number 5. I had a problem with this. I take pause with this one. We've often heard quarterbacks is the toughest position coming into the league. That might be true mentally, but you cannot consider the toughest position in the league something where you don't have physical confrontation every snap. Tight end likely right behind it. I've never heard that before. The person who said this like it was canon. I started thinking about it. He might be right because you got to think about offense. You got to think about the run game, the pass game. You're asked to do. It just depends. Like if you're a real tight end, yeah. If you're a guy who lines up in the slot, probably not. The question is, what are the next 2 or 3 toughest positions to just come out and start and be effective in your opinion? And the way I would say it is this. All things being equal, I think the more decisions you have to make, the harder it is. Okay? The closer to the ball that you get, the more compact the information is. So in other words, if you're playing wide receiver and you're singled up, you got to look at the receiver, you look at the safety rotation. It's kind of like a big space to figure that stuff out. So you can kind of see the landscape, make decisions. I'm not saying it's easy, but now if you're playing center, if you're playing guard, you're playing tackle, you're playing tight end, you're playing fullback in the backfield, if you're in there's like 7, 8 dudes right in front of you and they're all moving around, they're shifting, and you got to make all these calls, set hut. And you got to get your footwork right, and you got to get your hands, your body position. I think that's hard. And conversely, on the defensive side of the ball, linebacker making calls in his first year, Quay Walker last year, you see this, like it's hard because all the checks, then all of a sudden the running back shifts from pistol over to red, and you're like, oh, set hut. And you had to shift, you had to bring everybody in, you got to make the calls. Like the more decisions you have to make pre and post snap, in a condensed area, I think are harder. So when I look at like coming in being effective, center, guard, middle linebacker. Not that they're like the hardest positions in the world to play. I just think it's hard to be really effective at the level in the National Football League early just because of all the stuff that's condensed in there. I don't think physically it's as difficult as wide receiver. I don't think physically it's as difficult as defensive end. But again, just the reads, all the mental processing is just a little bit harder. So for that reason, I would say maybe those positions. I think we had 2 more or 1 more. I saw one that I liked. Oh, yeah, I love this one. Would your or players during your playing period off-season process differ significantly from players in the league today? If so, pros and cons of both approaches. That is a great question. The answer is it would be significantly different. No, let me rephrase that. The answer is there are players in the league right now who are taking care to do everything to like leave no stone unturned when it comes to getting bigger, faster, stronger, getting technically sound, doing everything they can so that when July training camp hits, they are the best version of themselves. They've got all their ducks in a row. They got all their support staff in order. They're doing everything they can to be successful. Now, whether or not, and that's what, at least in theory, that's what we thought, me and my small group of people thought that we were doing. Now, whether or not, I lifted more weights than this guy, that guy lifts more than me. I train for 3 hours. He trains for 2. He trains for 4. He trains 3 times a day. I train for whatever it is. Like semantics, right? I prided myself on out preparing people and training really hard. So I took pride from that. So that's what I thought about all the time. I have good friends in the league who are like, dude, I can't live your life. I can't do this all the time. I need other stuff. That's all I was happy. That's all I needed. I just needed that. Hang out with my wife, hang out with my friends. That's all I wanted to do. I think other people need more than that. And so they find other things to do. And maybe that adds to what they're doing on the field because they have better perspective, or maybe it takes away. I don't know. But what I do think, and I think this is important, because they make so much money now, the thought is about longevity much more so than reaching peak performance. And I don't necessarily think those have to be exclusive, but I think we've made them exclusive. I think guys look at it like, why am I going to blow out and go as hard as I can right now? Where if I just kind of take a slow and steady pace, I can still play at a high enough level to make a ton of money, have success in this league. The competition's doing the same thing. And now I can play for maybe 13 years instead of 6 or instead of 10 or 15 years instead of 12 and I can make, $10 million a year, that's $30 million. It's that math works for me. As opposed to, hey man, I'd rather burn out than fade away. I'm gonna go as hard as I can. I'm gonna be the best player I can. And if it lasts 8 years, great. If it lasts 10 years, great. If it lasts 12, like I don't know what that looks like, but right now in this moment, I'm gonna be as best as I can. I'm gonna do things as best as I can. I think perspective, money, all that stuff has changed a little bit. Branding has changed a little bit. I don't know. I don't think it's for the worse because the game is doing so well. But I do think there's significant opportunity for people with maybe subpar or average athleticism or average talent that can catch up with all these guys that are like maybe more talented but don't work as hard. All of a sudden you can catch up and pass these guys. This is a hard sport. So if you learn how to take confidence in your preparation because you're outworking everybody else, you can make it pretty far in this league. And by the way, when I watch, we point this stuff out during the season. Technically, there's not a lot of great players in this league. Technically, the ones that are get paid 3 times, 4 times more than the rest of them. Like you look at the guys who are getting paid the most in the league, they're usually the best technicians in the league. Talk about receivers on releases, catching the ball. Talk about tackles and guards with their pass sets. Like those, the best guys in the world, they're the best for a reason. It's not just physical. Like they're technically better than other kids. They get paid a ton more. So it's just how you see it, man. It's like I was a guy who was an average athlete, so I figured I had to work harder. So I was like, I'm going to work harder. And I lasted 11 years. I blew my shoulder out. I could have lasted 15, except for this. But you can't really look at it that way. However long you get is how long you get. Do the best you can while you're there. I think if you're a really talented guy, you're like, wait a second, I don't need to like beat myself up every day. I'm super talented. I've got all the I just have a processing speed that's better than everybody else's. I don't need to worry about some of this physical stuff and beat the hell out of myself in the off season. I'm just going to go ahead and do my thing. And I can last 15, 20 years, make a ton more money, have maybe a greater impact in the broader landscape of society than a guy like me who's just like hiding under a rock working out every day. So it's food for thought. It certainly is um, a lot of that comes down to just what you prioritize and what's important to you. And I think that changes for everybody. And it doesn't make it right or wrong, but certainly I have a very specific way I'd like to do things and, work for me.